We built a massive lithium battery bank for our 78-foot boat using 56 raw lithium iron phosphate cells from Alibaba. This bank powers everything: fridges, ovens, stovetop, computers, just like a house. After months of researching and learning, I custom built the system and added 6 large solar panels to keep it charged.
Fully charged! It's fully charged! It's fully charged!
4 years later, we're showing the pros and the cons and whether it's big enough, or if we need to go bigger. When we initially bought Tangaroa, we had 3 battery banks on board. There was a 12-volt house bank up in the front underneath the forward locker. There were the main engine start banks in the engine room, and then there was another 24-volt battery bank at the aft of the boat on the aft deck. A bit of a mess everywhere. We had an inverter in the bow running off of the 12-volt bank. We had 2 old Hart interface inverters sitting in the main salon area that powered some of the things. And then I think the back batteries were just for running the windlass or whatever back there. Just before we went to leave Alaska with the boat, while trying to start the engines, we had one of the new batteries that they installed exploded in the engine room. It actually blew the top open on the battery. Super scary. Not an ideal situation. They ended up warrantying it for us. However, that was not super awesome. That was a brand new battery. Now the batteries that were on the boat, they weren't very big in capacity, so we had to run the generator the whole way down. There was no way that the batteries would handle the capacity of that inverter in the front to keep the heaters going the whole way down. So we had a generator running 24/7 all the way down from Alaska. This wasn't a viable solution for living on board. We also had the house bank at one point started to bubble. Typically that's a situation where you have a high voltage on the bank. However, I knew that the voltage settings on the inverter hadn't changed. There was nothing different there. We just got home one day and the boat smelled like rotten eggs, which is a pretty clear indication of hydrogen, that the batteries are bubbling off. Very scary. Hydrogen's very flammable, could be an explosion risk, so we lucked out on that one, but we had to do something.
So we just came back from the pub and we walked into the boat. I was like, man, it stinks. And Blaine's like, yeah, stinky bilge. Was it stinky bilge, Blaine?
It wasn't stinky bilge.
What was it, Blaine?
It was stinky batteries.
Uh-huh. So batteries, when they bubble over, smell like rotten eggs?
Yep. Yeah, because they make, what is it, hydrogen.
Where are they?
They're upstairs.
Why were they bubbling?
Well, I reconnected the DC-DC converter, and even though the battery voltage is low on the DC converter, I think the batteries are just done, so they boiled.
So we need new ones. Will the battery acid eat through anything up there? Like, did it bubble over?
It's in a wooden box up there, so it didn't bubble over. It boiled a bit, but they're a bit wet. But, yeah.
I wish you guys could smell this. Freaking reeks. Where are they? Oh, they're right in there.
Yeah, that's them in there. And they are old and not happy.
Now I need to figure out what kind of batteries we were going to be putting in. We looked at new lead acids, we looked at gel cells, we looked at carbon pile. Eventually I decided on lithium batteries. They had the best power density, so I got more power from the same weight. They lasted longer than lead acids, so I knew I was going that way with it. So to figure out how much battery power I needed, I first needed to figure out what my loading was going to be. Now there's tons of calculators online that you can find for this. I don't remember which one I used because that was 4 years ago. However, one good one that I found here today is this one on Ocean Planet Energy Inc., their website. If you scroll down to the bottom, they've got an Excel spreadsheet down here. And if you open that spreadsheet, that'll open up the load calculator. Now, I took the liberty of pre-adding some things in here just to give you a rough idea. So you can do your AC loads. So see here you're calculating your AC loads. And then down at the bottom, you can do the same for your DC loads. And then at the very bottom of everything, they're going to give you a total for all DC and AC loads. To put something in, I started to populate this. So you can see here, oven. This is just a rough calculation of how many hours a day we're using it, rough calculation of how many amps, beer fridge, welder, dryer, and then it basically fills it all in for you. So down here, total watt hours per day for listed AC load. So that's 6516 is what it's calculated is our total watt hour for the day. So I know that to support just these loads, the way that we're doing it on average, I would need 6,516 watts of battery power. Now, this doesn't take into account the DC loads. This is purely our AC loading. And it's not even accurate for what we're doing, but that'll give you the rough idea of how you have to calculate it. Now, I can't remember exactly what ours worked out to be, but what I ended up settling on was a 30 kilowatt hour battery bank. And that's given us enough power to basically be able to run the boat for 2 days solid with no input from solar, which most people on boats are pretty used to recharging batteries daily. It's pretty nice to not have to do that. But yeah, that's how I did my calculations and ran down to 56 batteries. Now there's a few different options when you go to install a lithium battery bank in a boat. You've got your plug-and-play batteries, so your Battleborns, your Renogy, the Dakota batteries. They're a self-contained unit, so they have all the cells inside. They have a BMS built into them. Victron makes them as well. And then that BMS is what keeps the batteries safe. Unfortunately, there's a few drawbacks with that type of battery system. For starters, you're confined to that package. You're confined to how much amperage they will support. You're confined to their particular communications protocols. I didn't really want that, and not to mention they were extremely expensive for what you're getting for amp hours. So what I ended up choosing, because I'm a techie kind of guy and I like the wiring stuff, is we went with a do-it-yourself or a build-your-own bank. There are a lot of choices out there for bare cells, and I've looked through Winston's, I looked through Eve cells. There's a couple of other ones that I looked at. The one that really stood out to me was CALB, which is China Aviation Lithium Battery. These have a really good reputation in the lithium battery industry. Frankly, pretty much all the lithium cells that are coming out these days are coming from China. So it's picking a good set from China, and CALB is well known in this space, and that's why I chose them. Janice had been running an importation business for years, and she had a lot of experience dealing with suppliers off of Alibaba. So we got in touch with one of the suppliers there, and I believe we ended up getting the cells for around $120 per cell, which is a pretty good deal. These batteries were going to take about 4 weeks to get here because, quite frankly, they were taking this little boat from China. And that's my bank. It was time for solar. Just like the lithium batteries, there are multiple different options for solar panel. You've got your flexible panels that you see on a lot of boats. You can roll them up, move them out of the way, lay them out on deck. Some of them you can walk on, and another one would be your rigid panels like you see on a house. They're a glass panel. You can't walk on them. They've got an aluminum frame around the outside. Now, the flexible panels, while they seem like a good idea on the boats, the unfortunate downside is the output on those is considerably less than what you'd see on a rigid panel, say on a house. Very big difference. So we've got lots of room up on the upper deck. We decided on rigid panels. We don't have to walk on them. We can walk around them, no issue. So we picked up 6 Canadian Solar CS3U 395 watt panels and went about connecting them. Now from the same supplier, we picked up kinetic rail mount setups for these solar panels. And what that does is it mounts big rails on the deck and the solar panels mount on top of that. And one of the big benefits of that is you get airflow underneath the panels. So your panels stay cooler, and cooler panels make more power. One thing that we had to keep in mind is that we wanted the upper deck usable. So I had to find a way to mount these cells where they were out of our way and we could still move around and use the deck. We had to find room up on deck for this. We had windsurfers, we had kayaks, Janice had our hammock poles, which I could not interfere with those in any way, shape, or form. And we had a tender that went up on deck on occasion. So we had to set these up in a way that worked around what we had. So I ended up putting them in kind of a triangle shape on the top of the boat, which gave us room for everything else around them. And this is our solar farm. We had obvious space constraints here because We've got windsurfers, we've got kayaks and paddle boards, we've got the tender, and most importantly, we've got our hammock poles here. And this is where Janice and I love being in the summertime. So we couldn't block any of that space. So I've laid them out this way, where I've used the one portion of triangle deck that we're not currently using for anything else. And it's worked really well. So these are 390 watt cells each. And currently I've got them configured in 2 strings of series cells. So 3 series cells in each string. They make, I think, 30 volts each, so I'm about 90 volts on each string. I've tried a few different configurations with them. Originally I had them as 3 sets of 2 panels, which I might even go back to at some point, but this seems to be working pretty well for us right now. Now, one thing that I've noticed after having the panels on board for 4 years is we can never have enough. These are amazing. However, summertime we do okay. Wintertime, not so much, but I want to make excess. So I'm looking at doing another 3 panels up here, and they will be bigger panels, probably closer to 490 watt panels each. And still toying around with how I'm going to fit those, because obviously we're still tight on space. So that'll be whether or not we get rid of 1 or 2 panels of the smaller panels and get 2 bigger panels, make a fold out where we can extend them off the side of the boat to get more. I don't know. We'll see in the future, but there are plans for upgrades to this system for sure. This is an exciting time for me because right now I have the water maker running, which is a fairly big system, and as you can see, that's what we're putting into the battery. Sorry, taking out of the battery currently. So 1 amp out of the battery, because we're making so much solar that it's running the water maker by itself. So that's really awesome, because that means we can run the water maker as long as we want and we're not taking out of our batteries. Gotta love that. We also picked up a Victron MPPT to control all of the solar panels. MPPT is for maximum power point tracking. So that MPPT just sits there and it figures out where it's making its best power, and it does that continuously. We were dealing with pretty old equipment on the boat. All of the inverters were fairly old, especially the Trace and the Hartwinds aft, so we needed something better. We also needed some good 240 volt power because we weren't going to be running the generator. So we ended up going with Victron. I believe they were the 3024 inverters, so they're a 24 volt inverter, and they're 3,000 watts each, and we ran 2. And the reason why we ran 2 is because we wanted 240 volt power, and we wanted to split the phases. So one inverter does one phase, the other inverter does the other phase, and they combine to make 240. Plus this gives us a little bit of redundancy as well. If we ever have one fail, we've got a second one that can at least get us 120 volt power. Now, when I was looking for inverters, I totally geeked out on the Victron stuff. It was pretty advanced. I've dealt with inverters before in the past. This stuff was pretty awesome. It was super programmable, which I love. The integration was unlike any of the other ones that I could find. So it tied into my battery management system via CAN bus. It would talk and they transferred data back and forth. They were super easy to integrate in with the solar control, the inverters, I can have it to my phone where I can start generators. This stuff was gold. It was awesome. An electrical system of this size, we knew it was going to be expensive, and we only wanted to spend the money once. That's why we spent so much time, and that's why we went with the Victron, because it is basically future-proofing what we need to do on the boat. Initial install on the batteries and the inverters was down in the back corner of the engine room. Unfortunately, 56 batteries and 2 inverters, an auto transformer, an MPPT take up a lot of space. And at the time, I didn't have a lot of other places to put them because there were things everywhere else. So there they went. 4 years later, the main issue that we ran into is we get pretty cold winters here in BC. We're in Victoria, so it's not as bad, but it still gets pretty cold. And down in the engine room, there's no heat. Last year, we had the temperature drop very low. We had frozen water all around us here. And we got to the point where the battery bank was too cold to charge. So we've reached a very not so good part of the very cold weather. Our lithium batteries are too cold to accept a charge. So we're gonna have to see how we can do here. I might see if I can heat them up a little bit so they'll actually charge, but yeah, that's never a good thing. But worst case, we can always fire up an engine, and that'll warm up the engine room and warm up the batteries. But for the time being, there is no charge happening. Hi.
And
I'm just closing off all the vents.
is it going to work, maybe?
I think so. The generator's already speeding up.
I can hear
I
that.
think it's gonna get there, but it might take a little bit.
Come on, little batteries. You can do it.
Yeah.
You can do it.
It'll get there. Ooh.
Close all the vents. It's already warmer in here. Okay. I don't want to go out there. I can see my breath out here. Okay. Now have Stella and Portia running late.
Yes. So
Why?
Stella and Portia firing the engines up not just warms up the engine room, it also heats up the lithium bank, because right now we're using lithium bank for starting the engines. So the act of starting the engines and drawing that much amperage will actually warm the batteries up, and it warms them up enough where it can start charging. So we've successfully started charging the batteries. With all the benefits of lithium, one of its downsides is you cannot charge it below freezing. It will destroy the batteries. So the battery management system looks at the temperatures of the cells and the core temperature, and it basically tells everything else whether you can charge or not. And unfortunately, it was a you cannot charge. And when you're sitting here in the winter, your whole house depends on power. That's a pretty big issue. They'll still discharge at low temperatures, but you can't charge them. So I think we had both engines running, we had blankets on them, and I think it took 2 hours worth of running the generators, or the engines, to warm the engine room up enough where the lithium started charging. So, long story short, we ended up having to move the batteries, and now they're directly underneath where I'm sitting here now in the pilot house, where it's warmer.
What's the plan, Stan?
Well, fortunately I've got lots of width here, so I won't be right up against the outer wall, but I am going to try to make it right up against the inside wall.
So all the lithium batteries are going in here.
Oh yeah.
This is a much better place for them.
I think so. I mean, the weight, the only thing I don't like is it brings the weight up higher in the boat, especially when we're removing ballast down below. But this is the driest place on the boat, so this is, for me, it makes sense. So.
And it's easy access just through the roof down to all the panels.
Yep, exactly. It's close to everything. It's close to my electrical distribution. It's close to all the instrumentation. It's close to the fuse panels. Close to the generators. It's just a good location. So this is where they're going.
He's very happy with his new area.
Yes, it's like it was made for the batteries up here.
It looks like it was.
This is a good dimension. So we'll come out to about here with the batteries for length, and they'll come out about that far from the back wall. Getting the batteries moved up to this compartment, and sadly it looked pretty tragic before I started. It was half painted, the floor was in terrible condition, so I'm painting today, which I absolutely despise doing. Probably my least favorite thing to do. So painting is done as far as I'm going to paint it, and turned out pretty well. It's not a perfect finish for by any means, but
Because you are not
it'll
a perfect painter.
it'll do for what Jenna says it's because I'm not a perfect painter, and I would agree. But it'll do for the purposes that we're after, and it does look a lot better than it did before. So I'm going with it. Okay, this is that framework that I was talking about here that I got to get down in there. It basically just supports the base of the batteries, leaves a bit of an air gap underneath. So let's get it down in there. The darkness. I'm down in my hole. I am disconnecting the battery bank so I can shift the batteries up to the pilot house, which is a very slow process. You guys can see here, and then I got to move each individual battery up to the pilot house through darkness because no batteries, no engine room lights. Fortunately, there is a hole on the other side where it's kind of like a skylight, but it's still quite dark in here. So I'm going to carry on with this and start moving these batteries out of here, get them to their final home. All right, time to start populating this this battery box. There we go, they're all in. Now I have to go down and get the BMS system, all my fuse blocks. Unfortunately, I've got new everything coming for these, and I see another cell that's backwards, another two cells that are backwards, but I've got to bring all that stuff up, and I've got to build a control box. I've got new relays and everything for the control box, but unfortunately they're back in Victoria, so I can't put those in yet. They'll have to be done at a later time, but for the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and get everything up here, get it all ready to go, and I should be able to get the bank back up and operational today. It's just not going to be my finished product, unfortunately, which seems like everything that always happens on this boat. So my first connection here is, I don't actually plug it in yet, but this is my cell tap harness. This is what measures the voltage on each individual row of batteries. The most critical part of the lithium battery BMS setup. This is what makes sure you don't fry batteries, because that's basically what everything is based off of in the lithium stuff, is the voltage, and they want to make sure that you don't exceed set voltages and all of that. And the BMSs that I use, it's all programmable. So I tell it what voltages I'm not willing to exceed, which is usually conservative of the actual battery manufacturer's specs, by a small margin. Because with the way that I'm using these banks, the ones that I build, I don't need to push them right out to the outer envelope. There's no sense in it. It's just additional wear and tear on the batteries. I usually keep them kind of within their middle voltage range, or middle state of charge ranges, anywhere from 20 to 80 basically. I don't drag them right down to the bottom, and I don't push them right to the top. But yeah, just get these guys connected up. So this is my new bus bar configuration. I used to use just the copper straps, and some people say, oh, you're not going to get any movement with that, you're going to crack terminals, whatever, yada yada yada. I actually just leave them to free float. So if you look, there's small gaps between the batteries. They will eventually expand a bit with old age, but not enough to cause an issue. And the way, like I said, the way that I use them, unlikely that they'll do much. And they should have a good long lifespan. Now, unfortunately, the configuration that I have up here is backwards of where it was down in the engine room. So basically I have to cut loose all my tape here and then flip ends with the connector. Fortunately, when I built this, I didn't trim down the wires. I just looped them back into the loom. So I have full length on those to change that around. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now, and I'll bring you guys back on when I start doing other connections. All right, so there's, we'll call it finished for now. Sorry I didn't get some more video yesterday. However, I got in a bit of a rush at the end of the day to try to get the batteries back up and running. So this is functional now with everything that it needs. But yeah, there's still obviously some tidy up to do and whatnot. And who knows when I'll get back to that. But for now, I've got it up and operational just to get us going and get them out of the way in the engine room. Oh, my battery bank was set back in the back corner of the engine room back here, basically where this tank is, close to where the inverters and everything are, for obvious reasons. You keep everything close together, less cable runs, everything just is easier. So now that the battery bank is up in the pilot house and my solar control is still back here on the back wall, I've got to run my power cables up to the battery bank from here. Pretty simple job, and it's just my main positive cable. I still have a ground bus bar on the back wall here. So I'm good for that for now. Eventually all this is going to get moved up forward, but for now this just gets us back up and running with our solar. With the solar is just, we're going to be needing it. So yeah, hooking it back up again. This is the current iteration of the battery bank. This was moved up into the main salon when we did the engine repower, which was roughly 3 months ago. And it's a lot happier up here due to the temperature being higher in this point of the boat. So what you see is our 56 CALBSE 180 cells, and they're connected in a series or a parallel series configuration. So as you can see, there are 7 cells in parallel and 8 cells in series. So this gives us 24 volts, and I think it's like 1,280 amp hours of 24 volt. So all of this needs some sort of control on it to make sure that it doesn't overcharge, undercharge, over discharge. That's what this guy does. That's an Orion BMS2. It's what you'd call a standalone battery management system. A lot of your pre-made plug-and-play batteries have this built into them. This is a more configurable and better option for me anyway. So what this does is it monitors cell voltages. So you see all these orange wires that run down across here. Each one of these wires goes to one of the custom bus bars. I made these bus bars specifically for this battery bank and this configuration. They're thick enough to be able to handle the amperage that this battery bank is able to put out. And I made them specifically with spots where I could connect up these cell taps is what they're called. So they measure voltage at each cell, and that basically tells the BMS where the batteries are in state of charge, and it prevents overcharging and over discharging, because both of those are bad on lithium battery banks. Over discharging can kill batteries, permanently reduce their output, and obviously overcharging can cause thermal runaway, meltdowns of the batteries, which we also don't want. So this guy does all of that. So the way the BMS does that is it's got multiple outputs that control this bank of relays here. And each one of these relays is a specific thing. One will be for the main contactor, one will be for a discharge current limit, the other one will be for a charge current limit, and then I can't remember what the last one's for, but I'm certain it does something. It's been a while. So anyway, each one of those things, 2 of these will send information out to my my Victron equipment to tell them to turn on and turn off in various points of their operation. So say for example, I'm charging and my cell limits get to the top end. This relay will trip off and it will tell the battery manager, or sorry, the Victron equipment to stop charging. It also does that via CAN bus. However, I like to have multiple ways of doing that, just as backup. So if you have one-way fail, you've got a redundant system in place. The other one will do the same, but in discharge. So if we start charging low, the batteries drop below a certain point, it'll turn off all the inverters to make sure it doesn't discharge too far. There's also a grand disconnect, which is this guy right here. So that's my main contactor. This is where a lot of the big difference is between, say, your plug-and-play batteries and this battery system. Your plug-and-play batteries will usually use a solid state, which means it's a transistor or something like that that turns on and off to allow the current to come in and out of the batteries. And they've got a considerably lower capacity than what this one does. This is a Gigavac GX110 or GV110 contactor. This will do 1,000 amps continuously through this contactor, which is also within the range of the batteries. The batteries can handle 1,200 amps continuous discharge for an hour. So that's an enormous amount of current potential. This contactor will actually handle up to 1,500 amps, but will derate over a specific amount of time as it warms up. So when you hear people talk about lithium battery banks not being able to do engine starting, they're referring to plug-and-play batteries, or at least some. They're getting better these days, but the early ones, the BMS couldn't flow enough power. The batteries could, but the BMS inside the batteries could not flow enough. This can flow enough. We've had this bank starting our 14-liter Detroit diesel engines with zero issues for years. They're no longer doing that with the new engines. I've got a dedicated start bank for that, just for redundancy. But these batteries don't even feel that. They are capable of putting out considerably more amperage than that. Technically, they can do a 10C discharge, which C rate is basically your battery capacity. So this is 1280, and the number before that would be the multiplier. So 10C would be 1280 times 10. So do that calculation and you'll see how much amps these batteries can actually put out for short durations. We never use them like that, and I never will. However, that'll just give you an idea of the capability of these lithium banks. Another important item, obviously battery disconnect. This is a manual one. If I ever have to do any maintenance, first thing I can do is pull the contactor plug, which will disconnect the bank, and then I can also turn this switch off, which will permanently disconnect everything. Next thing up is our main fuse. Now you'll see a lot of fuses in RV, marine, what are they, the maxi fuses, the T-class fuses. None of them are capable of doing what this battery would require for fusing. Sure, they get up there in amperages. However, their interrupt rating is not enough for the maximum amperage these batteries will put out if they get the potential to. What that means is every fuse has got a rating. So say for example, I've got a 700 amp fuse on here. So that fuse will probably blow in the 800 and change amp range. Now what the interrupt rating is some fuses, even though they will blow at that rating, there is a chance that they could fuse and not interrupt the circuit if the amperage is high enough. These are rated for that. So these, I can't remember the exact rating, but it's in the tens of thousands of amps that these can safely interrupt. So when this trips, even if it trips at a brief 10,000 amp spike, it will completely and safely disconnect that system, which is critical. That interrupt rating, a lot of people don't know about it. That's very important, especially when you start getting into the discharge capacities of lithium batteries. That's pretty much it. I've got my bus bar here. This is my positive bus bar. I'm not 100% finished getting these batteries moved in. There's eventually going to be a negative bus bar here as well. I've currently just got it temporarily connected with a wire. But that's our lithium bank. Now with every system, you have pros and cons. We had this system for 4 years now, so I feel we can speak on this. Big pro, lithium has got massive storage capacity. We can, even in the winter time, with not really anything for power smart, we can go for 2 days, a full 2 days of running everything, all of our stoves, ovens, you name it. The battery bank will do it, and it will do it admirably. We run heating blankets at night in the winter time. I mean, 4 computers running at any given time, it's pretty immense. I can run my welder. I mean, I've got a 200 amp welder that the battery bank really doesn't even feel it much, especially in the summertime. If we get a little bit of solar happening, I can sit here and I can weld all day long and we're still great for power. A huge benefit is the ability of the lithium to take a charge. It can accept an enormous amount of amperage. We run ours at about 220, but it can accept up to a 400 amp charge continuously, and that's a slow charge. It can actually handle 1200 amps in a fast charge capability. That's huge, and to be able to charge that fast means you cut your generator times down considerably, which is just great all around. Lithium is also light and compact. I've got a considerably larger amp hour capacity and a smaller footprint and lighter footprint than I'd get with lead acid. Another benefit is lithium lasts longer. Typically a lead acid battery is around 500 cycles you can get out of them. They'll probably still work, but at reduced capacity. Lithium can go 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 cycles. So if you compare that, even though lithium is more expensive in the initial hit, your long-term cost is going to be less with lithium because you're only replacing the batteries at that point, not the whole system that you've built. So definitely a better way to go. And in case you're wondering, what I mean by cycle is basically a charge to discharge to charge cycle. That's pretty much it. Great thing about the system is integration. The ability of everything to work together as one system is really big. One thing that I love about this system is I can monitor everything from my cell phone. Thanks to Victron. They have an app, VRM, and it allows me to see everything with the system. It goes back in time. You can see the last 12 months. As long as you have internet connection, it will show everything that the batteries, the electrical, everything has been doing. I can start my generator for remotely, so if I notice my batteries are going down and we're in Boston, I can turn on the generator, charge the batteries. It will do it automatically if I so desire. It's just brilliant. I do, however, have to make a quick call to Izzy to let her know that I'm starting up the generator if she's home, because if she's by herself and all of a sudden the generator fires up, it might spook her a little bit. This is obviously a true off-grid system, and we love the fact that we don't have to go into a dock, like ever, if we don't want to. We get all of the power in the summertime. We don't even have to run a generator for months of the year. And in the wintertime, we've got the generator to keep everything going. It's pretty freeing to know you don't have to use shore power at all. Now the pros sound pretty amazing, but there are always cons. So let's get into that. First and probably largest would be that this system is very complex, especially the lithium setup. It requires, especially the way that I've done it, it requires a fairly considerable amount of knowledge in control systems, knowledge about charging profiles, CAN bus communications. It's not simple. It's not for everybody. That's why they have the plug-and-play systems that you can buy from Battleborn and Victron and Renogy. Those are considerably more simple. This is not that. What I've done and everything that I've done with all the different systems, it's a pretty considerable amount of complexity. Another thing is we're not in the Caribbean, we're not in Mexico, we're in Canada. And in the wintertime, the sun is low, the irradiance is low, the solar does not produce much. It's a pretty small input into the system. It does extend it a bit, but it's very minimal. So we end up running the generator 1 to 2 hours a day in the wintertime just to keep everything topped up. We could go multiple days without, and we do on occasion. It just means more generator runtime, which we try to avoid. We touched on this before, but another issue with the Lithium will not charge below freezing. And we're hoping not going to be an issue for us anymore, but it is something that you would need to think about on your placing of the batteries and the function of them. Another thing you have to get used to with lithium banks is that your state of charge can tend to not be accurate, like the percentage that you see on your monitoring system. Now, that kind of comes on the back of a Pro, because lithium is very stable for voltage. It's got the voltage curve from fully charged to empty is fairly flat. Unlike lead acid, where it's kind of a little linear, you get voltage drop the lower you go, which makes lead acid really easy to figure out where your state of charge is. With lithium, you have a big drop at the beginning, or I guess, how would I put this? At the top of the charge, you have a really big rise in voltage, and at the bottom of the charge, you have a really fast dip in voltage, but across the entire middle is fairly flat. And because of that, until you bring that battery bank all the way to the bottom or charge it all the way to the top, the monitoring system does not know where the state of charge for the batteries is. And the only way that it can do that is to hit those knees on either end. And then it starts counting amperage. It knows your bank size, it knows you're at full, it can tell where you're at by how much you're burning. And sometimes it can get out of whack and you'll say 40% on your batteries when they're actually at 20%. And then all of a sudden they do this big drop down to 20%. And you're like, where'd all my battery go? It was never there. It's just the calculation got askew, and now it's getting itself reinitialized and back to knowing where it was. One of the downfalls of lithium is that it requires a battery management system to handle all of the charging and discharging and current limits of that bank, which increases the initial cost of the whole system in general. Not to mention the cells themselves are more expensive. I mean, if you add up $120 per cell for 56 cells, plus another $1,000 for a good battery management system, plus the contactors you need to open and close the current path just in case you have a voltage issue or things like that, you get a lot of initial investment on the lithium. Now, if you compare that with lead acid, it's considerably higher. However, over time, let's say 10 years down the road when we need to replace this battery bank, all we have to replace is the cells. And in the time span that these cells have lasted us, how many lead acid batteries we would have gone through, it's actually cheaper in the long run for the lithium because of how much longer they last. Even though the expense of the battery is greater, you're better off in the long run. After 4 years of having this system, I can honestly say it is the best investment that we made on the boat. It is the one system that we've pretty much had zero issue with, short of the cold temperatures. It's been amazing. We love it. We love the range that it gives us. We love the ability of being able to live off grid. Summer times are amazing. And I've actually ended up putting a few systems on some other boats as well. One of the bigger ones that I did, I think, was 96 cells. It's like a 2,700 amp hour, 24 volt bank on a 100-footer. And he's running air conditioner units, you name it, and he can go all day long on a bank of lithium. So it is so nice to have. And the quiet of not having to run generators, I would do it again in a heartbeat. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room. Lithium on boats. I mean, going through comments on past videos on this, by far and above, it's the, oh my God, I can't believe you put lithium on your boat. Oh, you're gonna die, your boat's gonna burn. It's like doomsday. People are terrified of lithium. Some are justified in some things, however, big differences between, say, Teslas and what we have on board. These are lithium iron phosphate cells. The chemistry is different. They're not nearly as volatile as the lithium polymer batteries that you see in cars. And I'm sure there have been fires on boats. However, A, it's not common, and B, it's typically not it's typically not the end of the world. They'll typically self-extinguish with the LifeP04 cells. So we're comfortable with where we are, but stigma is huge.
I really hope that you enjoyed this video. It's the first time we've actually ever shown our solar setup on board Tangaroa. If you want to see more, don't forget to subscribe. And to really help out our new channel, watch this video next. We highly recommend it.